screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones, the holly suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The pomp proceeders mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Soul, where tonight we're talking about Bigfoot and Cain of the Bible, Cain and Abel Cain, and what they have to do with each other. Is Cain Bigfoot is the question we're talking about tonight. And I thought it'd be fun, take a little break from some of the ultra serious things going on in the world and society. And we'll get back to those, winning report this week and all the other times that we get back to those. But for now, let's dive into some pretty interesting distraction and fun. And it's actually not just a distraction, by the way. It actually leads back to some very solid ways of looking at our own soul and its path through the world, and of course back to God, which, I mean, how could I not talk about that? It's all I ever really talk about. So of course we'll get into that too, and we'll do it right now. Of course, you should go to roguesoul.org, where you can find all of the things I do, including my books, the fictional trilogy and of novels about the humanities traveling through dark ages and light ages all the way. Such a great book. It's so fantastic. Those 3 books, I should say. And also the source channeled message books of the Key of Transformational Healing and All Endings Are Beginnings. That's all here on Rogue Soul. It's also on Amazon. You can also listen to it as an audiobook on Audible. It's also anywhere books are sold. So all of those books are here. You can schedule one-on-one sessions with me, tarot readings, past life readings, sound healing journeys, and more. All of that is here on roguesoul.org. You can also go straight to the scheduling platform, which is Calendly. So it's all here on the site. You can choose which thing you want. But if you have it bookmarked, calendly.com/rogueways, as many of you do, then you can just pick anything you want. And what I want to draw your attention to is One Day of Brightness is coming up. This Saturday, the 27th, is our final One Day of Brightness. It is, of course, as you are listening to or watching this show live, the autumnal equinox. So happy fall equinox to you. This is the day of balance, where the universal ecliptic and the solar system's ecliptic passes the ecliptic of the sun. And so we're right in balance with all of that. We're in perfect alignment of the galactic plate. The solar system's plate. So many layers of cosmic energy to think of here. And so that's the equinox here on the 22nd of September. But One Day of Brightness is this Saturday. It's in alignment with that autumnal equinox, but it is on Saturday so that more people can join and attend. It is a massive blessings, messages, alignments, teachings, practices, and more. This is a session in the morning, a session in the afternoon, so it's a full day. It is super affordable. It's one of the most affordable things I ever offer to people. So you can join us, and all you have to do is click on it, schedule it, and there you go. The Zoom link will be sent to you. And if you can't make it to all of it that day, or if you can't make it live at all, the recording is also there, just as potent, just as powerful, but for you to get to in your own time. Anytime in the next 3 days, you're welcome to come back and watch that. Even if you did go live, you can watch it again. So that's all there for you. Hopefully you come join us this Saturday, especially because it's the last one. I would love to see as many people there as possible, and we give One Day of Brightness its best send-off. So also on the site is the shop, the favorite things tab, where you can check in with all of the products that I use for my own health and wellness. That is also great for you if you want to implement it. Orgone in the shop here, all of it's here at roguesoul.org. You can also become a subscriber at rogueways.substack.com. It is the best way to keep in touch. It's the best way to get the articles that I write. It's free. If you become a paid supporter, you also get some extra perks, like the channeled messages that come out. So any of the posts that say paid, you get full access to, including the entire back catalog, the entire archive of the 4 or 5 years I've been doing this Substack. All of the channeled messages, all of them are still timely, still beautiful, still timeless. And that is all here on rogueways.substack.com. So come check out Again, it is free also. If you want to be a free supporter, it's just a great way to stay in touch and get articles like this, No Pacifist Spiritual Leaders, and also the seemingly perhaps conflicting, but actually in perfect alignment, Murder is Evil. So those are the two most recent free articles, and the most recent channeled messages, The World is Ending. So really beautiful stuff here at rogueways.substack.com. Come be a supporter, subscriber there. If you aren't already, you are missing out. And so we'll start here. This is where I started in this journey of Bigfoot and Cain. And I was going about collecting all of the sort of various alternative versions of this rainbow sign that you see in a lot of people's windows, a lot of people's yards. It's very often a leftist thing where a lot of leftist ideologies are listed here. Like in this house, we believe that love is love and all genders are beautiful and, you know, everybody can do anything they want and everything is not my fault, but someone else's fault because I'm a victim and whatever else they say. But so I wanted to find, you know, all the other ones because there's some pretty funny ones out there that are like, in this house, we believe that my favorite one is like trite tautologies are not replacements for, you know, deep conversations about eternal truths or something like that. It's super funny and true, and also like really perfect comeback to signs like these that are meant to shame you into thinking you're like not a good enough person because you don't believe whatever they believe in their house, or you're not, you know, touting that political ideological line or whatever it is. But so the weirdest one I came across when I was gathering my collection of those sort of funny alternative versions of this sign was this one. And it says, in this house, we believe Bigfoot is real. He is Cain who slew Abel. He survived the flood. He wanders the earth. And he spoke with David W. Patton in Tennessee in 1835. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What is this? Because I've never heard this story before. Maybe you have. It's pretty remote. It's pretty, I'm not in any of the years and years and decades that I've been into like the alternative, the woo-woo, the conspiracy, the random, you know, spiritual, and all of this stuff. I've never heard this. And it turns out it's actually a Mormon thing. It's actually a Mormon thing to think that Bigfoot is real and that he's the biblical Cain who wanders the earth to this day. So fascinating to me. So I wanted to learn more about this. And of course, we'll go to Spookopedia because why not? It's not trying to hide anything about David W. Patton and Bigfoot, I'm guessing, but who knows? But on Wikipedia's article for David W. Patton, we can learn that he was a leader of the Latter-day Saint movement, which is Mormons, and an original member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which is a Mormon thing. It's like a governing body of the Mormon church, especially early on. And I think they still have it perhaps as a governing body, but original member. So the original Quorum of the 12 Apostles for the Mormon church of the Latter-day Saints. It says he was killed at the Battle of Crooked River, is regarded as a martyr by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and or the Mormons. And he's referred to twice in the Church of Jesus Christ's Doctrine and Covenants, once in section 114 and posthumously in section 124. So a big deal in the Mormon church. David W. Patton, one of the higher up, I would say like fathers of the church, if that's appropriate for Mormons. And so, yeah, 1800s guy, you know, that's all we really, I think, need to know about him. I don't know if we need to get any deeper into all of his sort of history. I did like this image here. This is a picture of his rifle. Look how beautiful this rifle is. Like, man, it's got all this, you know, metal sort of like accoutrement, handiwork, really beautiful workings of this, very polished, very beautiful. It says it was it told me what wood it was made of. Curly maple wood rifle. And it's cool. They've got his, you know, pouch here for his shot, his bullets. They've got his pipe. I'm thinking it says powder horn, so maybe that's different than a pipe. It looks like a pipe. I don't know what a powder horn actually is. It's got his stopwatch. I mean, these are all things that I would like love to have. I have a strong sort of connection to that time period because of one of my past lives. So whenever I see things from it, I'm always like, ooh, like I love this. And beautiful. And I'm also currently, kind of somewhat excited about learning to shoot rifles. So that's part of it too, is I'm like, ooh, I want this rifle. Probably not. It's probably one of the least efficient rifles you can have. I'm guessing it's like the round balls that you put in and you can only do like one at a time. I'm not really sure. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe at that time we had way cooler bullets than that, but looks pretty old school. Looks like it's probably not even semi-automatic. And yeah, but cool. So this is just some of his stuff. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight. I just liked that as I was sort of glancing through all of this stuff. But here we have the story of meeting Cain. This is in the Wikipedia article. It says Patton is reportedly the source of a story which has become part of Mormon folklore. As related by Abraham O. Smoot after Patton's death, Patton says he encountered a very tall, hairy, dark-skinned man in Paris, Tennessee, who said that he was Cain. I didn't know Paris had a fake Eiffel Tower in Tennessee, but it does. So he said that he was Cain. He met a hairy, dark-skinned man who said that he was Cain. The account states that Cain, the son of Adam from the Bible, had earnestly sought death, but was denied it, and that his mission was to destroy the souls of men. The recollection of Patton's story is quoted in Spencer W. Kimball's The Miracle of Forgiveness. In the 1980s, Patton's story was used by some Latter-day Saints to explain Bigfoot sightings in South Weber, Utah. So he didn't necessarily say it was Bigfoot. His story is just that he was in Tennessee. He was going through Paris, Tennessee. He met this dude. This dude was dark-skinned and hairy. And this dude said he was Cain, had tried to die since biblical time for many thousands of years, could not die, and his mission was to destroy the souls of men. There's some things here that could jive, right? Like if you look at the story of Cain and Abel that we'll get into, it is quite likely, I mean, there is like a dark side / demonic side / not the way back to God / not the way to live in the world energy to that story that Cain represents at the very least. And so a demonic sort of darker energy, that is the goal, right? Is to keep humans from becoming truly human or committing themselves to the path towards God or reuniting with God at all, or living in a way that is of God instead of the other. And that's the Cain sort of energy and sort of story. And that would be what, if Cain did continue to live, perhaps would be part of his role on earth. So this could jive. This could jive. A dark-skinned, hairy person is not necessarily a Bigfoot, though. And there's some racism in the Mormonism that's like pretty profound, right? Like we're the first here to call out the sort of like fake appeals to racism. Like, oh, this person's racist and that person's racist and that whatever because they don't agree with me or whatever. But actual racism, wherein you would imagine, for example, that all Black people are evil or of like a dark race, or that's like the Mormon type of race. Like that's actually racist. And in Mormonism, Black people actually are and maybe I'll make sure to pull up a source so I can get this right, because I'm working purely off memory here, but are African Americans looked at as evil by the Mormon Church? And I think they say now they didn't, but they used to. So here's the AI overview of it. It says, while the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormon Church, does not currently view African Americans as evil, its history is marked by racist teachings and discriminatory policies that barred Black members from full participation. And so that's their new official place, right? But they did say the church explicitly used to state that that Black skin is a sign of divine disfavor. So dark-skinned people, Black people, they are specifically evil, at least, right? Divine disfavor would be like cast out, God doesn't love you, right? Like you're not good. Pretty bad racist take. And so it supposedly reflected unrighteous actions in pre-mortal life, or that Black people are inferior. So they're evil, they're inferior, they I don't know what it would even mean if you don't believe in reincarnation or that souls come back and try this experiment again and again and again. Pre-mortal life would mean like what? Like before you even were born. What could you sin before you were even born? But anyways, this is the story that used to be true in Mormonism. Oh, here's another thing. The curse of Cain. For many decades, some church leaders taught that Black people were descended from the biblical figure Cain, whose lineage was supposedly marked with black skin as a curse for murdering his brother Abel. In the early 20th century, some leaders also introduced the theory that Black people were less righteous in their pre-mortal life, another justification for the priesthood ban on Black people entering the Mormon church. The church disavowed these theories in 2013. It took them till 2013 to say, like, actually, Black people aren't evil. We take that back. It took them quite a while. So there's all kinds of things in the Mormon church that are super wild, like that Jesus continued to live, that he came to America, that like he tried to, convert all the Native Americans here, and then this piece where the Black people are evil and all of that sort of stuff. So some people say they never really fully apologized. They just sort of changed it. They're like, oh, we don't think that anymore. But there was no like formal apology, and that matters. I don't know. To me, I'm like, oh, well, even if they are still racist or were racist or didn't apologize for it, it's none of our business. Technically, people are allowed to be racist. We can think that's not cool. We wouldn't do that. I don't agree with that. And also they're allowed to do it. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if you want to apologize, I guess, but it's none of my business. So that's the story. He met that black-skinned person, and that dark-skinned person, therefore, is automatically evil in his mind, especially back then, right? Took him till 2013. This is in 1826, right? Is that right? Yeah, somewhere around then, or 1836. And so, yeah, if you meet a dark-skinned man, they're already evil if you're a Mormon, back then especially. And then he was hairy. He specifically was hairy, right? So it is interesting that later on, as people in the Mormon church in Utah are having these Bigfoot encounters or having these experiences, or people reporting something like Bigfoot, and Bigfoot, if you think about it, he's dark-skinned and he's hairy. So they're like, oh, is it the dude that Patton saw? Is it biblical Cain? Is Bigfoot biblical Cain? And so this is sort of considered Mormon folklore now. But at the time, and even into recent days, there are people in the Mormon church who treated this as totally legitimate. Like, yeah, that's who Bigfoot is. That's exactly who Bigfoot is. Bigfoot is biblical Cain, and it's a dark-skinned, hairy man, which is a good description of Bigfoot. And his job is to destroy the souls of men. He would love to die, but can't. So he's this, he's this spiritual sort of paranormal being. And that is actually, again, like one of the best ways to describe Bigfoot is a paranormal being. Bigfoot is said to be able to be psychic. He's said to be able to, create an aura of fear so strong that you can no longer like choose your emotions or actions, and you're going to run away or, defecate yourself or worse. Right? That Bigfoot can disappear, reappear, that Bigfoot can jump 30 feet in the air if he needs to, that like Bigfoot could shapeshift. Bigfoot can look like a tree and you could walk right by him. Bigfoot smells like sulfur in many accounts. So if you believe in Bigfoot, Bigfoot is a paranormal being. And if you especially are of the mind that dark-skinned, hairy, beast-like creatures would be likely to be demonic, that sort of fits. But definitely if you think black-skinned people or dark-skinned beings already are demonic, even if they're people, then you definitely would think that Bigfoot is, right? So this is where it all sort of tied together, where Bigfoot became Cain from the Bible. Here's a person on Reddit that did some research into this. They say, here's a quote in that Spencer W. Kimball's classic book, The Miracle of Forgiveness, which the Wikipedia article mentioned as being one of the places where this story is immortalized. It says, as I was riding along the road on my mule, I suddenly noticed a very strange personage walking beside me. His head was about even with my shoulders as I sat in my saddle. So it is, I mean, this does not sound like a man at all. dark-skinned or otherwise, if someone is walking beside you and their head is even with your shoulders while you're on a horse, that's definitely Bigfoot. That's for sure not. It's a giant at least, right? Giants is a whole thing in the Bible as well, but maybe we'll get to that. He says he wore no clothing, ooh, also like Bigfoot, but was covered with hair. His skin was very dark. I asked him where he dwelt, and he replied that he had no home, that he was a wanderer in the earth and traveled to and fro. This comes back, right? This actually matches with Cain's story. Cain is said to have been cast out and become a wanderer of the earth, but we'll get back to that. He said he was a very miserable creature, that he had earnestly sought death during his sojourn upon the earth, but that he could not die, and his mission was to destroy the souls of men. About the time he expressed himself thus, I rebuked him in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, and by virtue of the holy priesthood, and commanded him to go hence, and he immediately departed out of my sight. So it's fascinating to me because invoking Jesus Christ is absolutely what causes demons to go fleeing in my experience, and also in this case. So I've never been around Bigfoot that I know of. I have a Bigfoot story, but it's a protective story, right? I was camping. There was definitely a person who was coming up on me in the middle of the night next to a river. Nobody would have heard me scream. I had no weapons with me. I didn't have my dog with me. Somebody was creeping towards my tent, and all I could think was, how am I going to fight this person off, because they're clearly coming towards my tent, and the only reason you would do that in the midst of a dark, empty, forested space with no one else around is if you were going to try to get into the tent. All right, this is my thinking. And so as I'm sitting there and I'm like praying to God, like, what am I going to do? I hear this blood curdling, craziest sound I've ever heard. I always have to mention, I grew up in the woods and in rural places. I've heard bobcats. I've heard them in heat. I've heard them fighting. I've heard coyotes fighting and in heat. I've heard, bears and wolves, and I've heard all kinds of noises. And I've never heard anything in my life that is anything like this sound. It sounded like a giant was in like guttural, soul-wrenching, either terror or attack, right? Either they were in terror or they were trying to sound ferocious to like fend something off. That's what it sounded like to me. Never heard anything like it. Stop me dead, cold blood, like just what? So now I have something coming towards my tent that it seems like a human being that's about to try to get into my tent. And then I hear that and I'm like, oh man, like, and I double attacked, like some crazy creature and also a person. But what happened is that person also heard that, stopped dead. What I heard as footsteps crunching through the fall leaves towards me, stopped, didn't move, and then ran away. So that sound, that scream, seems to have also stopped them and terrified them into running away. Saved my life, perhaps. I can't say, you can't say, but that's what it seems like. And so what was that? So I thank God, like whatever, thank God, like whatever this was, like, thank you, clearly it worked. And when I told that story to people, they were like, oh, it was Bigfoot. And I was like, because actually we had other encounters on that property that definitely seemed Bigfoot related. My husband at the time had been in the river in the early morning when it was dark, and he was gathering water to filter that we used for drinking water. And he had seemed to scare something off that he felt like was very large and bipedal. And I was like, was it another person like washing in the river? And he's like, it was way too big to be a person. And we were like, was it a bear? And we're like, bears can technically be bipedal, but they don't run away bipedal. So we were like, I mean, maybe Bigfoot's real, dude. I don't know, right? And then I had this experience and I was like, yeah, like maybe this was Bigfoot. So I had perhaps a Bigfoot account, but I haven't seen him. If he exists in physical form, right? I haven't seen it. I just seem to have heard it. And then my husband had an experience where he seems to have seen it. Again, it was very dark and in shadow. So, not something you could ever convince somebody with. You couldn't even convince us with it. We just thought maybe it's true. Maybe he exists. But also not evil. Definitely not evil, right? If you save my life, there's no evil there. So anyways, yeah, but rebuking something in the name of Jesus Christ and having it disappear is a pretty good sign it's demonic. So I don't know. Is this a demonic being? And so to say again, I don't see anything here that says that he said, like, I'm Cain. He just says he has no home. He says he was trying to die. He's been wandering the earth for a long time. He's miserable, and that he had this mission to destroy the souls of men. But he sounds like Bigfoot. The description matches Bigfoot for sure. So this person who's researching this on this Reddit thread says, this seems like a convincing account. I decided to look where this story first arose, or where, he got this. And there's another book titled The Life of David W. Patton, the First Apostolic Martyr, again, from the Mormon Church's perspective. And this was first published in 1900, so way before The Miracle of Forgiveness, which is the book that we just read from. So the story comes, he says, to us by way of a letter from a man named A.O. Smoot to President Joseph F. Smith. David Patton was the apostle who supposedly had this experience and was living with Smoot's father-in-law at the time. The author of the book first gives us some context. It was probably not long after his arrival in Tennessee in the spring of 1836 that David had one of the most remarkable experiences of his life. He, David Patton, was making his home with Levi Taylor, the stepfather of Abraham O. Smoot, at the time, and he had been to Paris, Tennessee, some 16 miles away, holding a meeting. Heading home, I'm guessing it meant, in the evening, just where his road lay through a dense growth of brush, called in those parts a barren, he suddenly became aware that a person on foot by his side was keeping pace with the mule on which he rode. But the subjoined letter, dated at Provo, Utah, will explain the matter. So again, he says, President Joseph F. Smith, Salt Lake City, dear brother, in relation to the subject of the visit of Cain to brother David W. Patton in the state of Tennessee, about which you wrote to me, I will say that according to the best of my recollection, it was in the month of September, 1835. It was in the evening, just twilight, when Brother Patton rode up to my father's house, alighted from his mule, and came into the house. The family immediately observed that his countenance was quite changed. My mother, having first noticed his changed appearance, said, Brother Patton, are you sick? He replied that he was not, but had just met with a very remarkable personage who had represented himself as being Cain. Okay, so here's where we get that he did actually represent himself as Cain, who murdered his brother Abel. He went on to tell the circumstances as near as I can recall in the following language. As I was riding along the road on my mule, I suddenly noticed a very strange personage walking beside me. He walked along beside me for about 2 miles. His head was about even with my shoulders as I sat in my saddle. He wore no clothing, but was covered with hair. His skin was very dark. I asked him where he dwelt at. He replied that he had no home, that he was a wanderer in the earth, and he traveled to and fro. He said he was a very miserable creature, that he had earnestly sought death during his sojourn. So this is the part that's quoted in the other book. And his mission was to destroy the souls of men. About the time he expressed himself thus, I rebuked him. He departed. And when he left me, I found myself near your house. So interesting, too, that he's in a heavy wooded area when this happens, which is where Bigfoot encounters tend to happen. When I was on that river and in the tent, that was on my own property, and it was in the middle of right next to, I should say, a national forest land, protected forest land that went for so many miles. I'm not even sure, hundreds of miles. It was huge. So definitely a place where Bigfoot would be living if Bigfoot exists. So this person goes about just picking apart that the dates don't necessarily match, and I don't really care about that. This is a Mormon person who's just sort of, or at least a Mormon adjacent person who's sort of exploring whether or not this story could have been true. So that the dates may not match is not that important to me. It's still really interesting, even at that, especially at that time, I'll say, to say that you had an encounter like this. And who knows, but I just don't know that if at that time, especially as like a father, an apostolic member of the quorum of 12 apostles or whatever he was, if you would want to be making up stories of like seeing demons in the form of hairy giants, didn't have the word Bigfoot yet, probably had some stories about it. It's not like they didn't exist before modern times. But I don't know. I don't know if you'd be likely to make that up. But again, it sort of fits like a Mormon perspective too, to say that like a dark-skinned being is of negativity or of demonic or of darker, punishment by God and having been cast out. So I don't know if that part, if you did have a Bigfoot encounter, did you maybe also then project onto Bigfoot this energy? I don't know. I just still find it fascinating that this ancient Mormon seems to have had a Bigfoot encounter, seems to say that it was Cain of the Bible, and that this was Cain's, punishment. So let's get to Cain's story in case you're not that familiar. This is right back at the beginning, right? Adam and Eve, first man and woman, right? Adam made love to his wife. This is straight from the Bible. And she became pregnant, gave birth to Cain. It's actually the first child of Adam and Eve is Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord, I've brought forth a man. Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. So Abel's the second. Now, Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So the first son isn't good enough. He just tills the soil, and that's not what God wants. But Abel, he has lambs, and he gives that to the Lord, and so that is way cooler. So Cain's jealous. He's angry. He's upset. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? What is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. So there's some clarification here. And, is this symbolic? Well, who knows? But God's saying to Cain, like, hey, you're the one who chooses to do bad, and you're the one who chooses to let sin in. Like, can you be mad about that? That's your choice. You also have the choice to do good. Cain says to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. So this is like, the first murder, the first spilling of blood, the first, problem that we create for ourselves. And then the Lord said to Cain, where's your brother Abel? And I don't know. He replied, am I my brother's keeper? This is a famous line. And it's something people talk about, like, are you your brother's keeper, actually, or are you not? And the Lord says, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. So we see, well, this ties back, right? Who are you? He asked the Bigfoot man. And the man said, I'm a wanderer on the earth. I travel to and fro. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. So he's saying, whoa, this punishment is way too much. I'm not going to be able to be in communion with God. I'm not going to be in your presence. And also I'm in danger, right? People can kill me now. So again, this goes back to people always ask, like, who are the other people on the earth? If Adam and Eve are the first, like, who are these other people? There's actually a lot of answers to that question. They're just not in traditional biblical takes, but I'm gonna share one with you in a moment. So whoever finds me will kill me, he says. But the Lord says to him, not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The land of Nod, where other people were who now won't kill Cain because he has a mark from the Lord. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father of Mehujael, and Mehujael was the father of Methuselah, and Methushael was the father of Lamech. Lamech married 2 women, blah, blah, blah. Tubal Cain and all these people. Ironworking and all of these things. Strings and music and tents and livestock, and all of this stuff comes out of Cain's progeny. And then some people say Lamech killed Cain because he says, I've killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me, etc. So who knows? That's just not really important to our discussion tonight, but it's a thing that people talk about. And then it says Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son, named him Seth. So Abel's dead, Cain lives. Cain's the sort of evil representative of evil. Abel's sort of the representative of good. Good was dead, but then Seth was born, and Seth now represents the new human line of good in connection with earth, God, I should say. And then, Cain represents the humans that are not in connection with God. This is one way to take it, at least. This is the story that is in the Bible, and this is the story that is referenced when Patton says that he met the hairy dark man who was a wanderer, and also who apparently said he was Cain. So not only was Cain cast out, maybe killed later, maybe not, apparently not killed, because perhaps he's been living since that time in the fallen state, in a sort of demonic state, and after people's souls. Which, all darkness and demonic energies are, if you acknowledge they exist, that is their goal. To take you back from God, to cut you off from God, and therefore, you lose your soul. And so that's the biblical story. Here is a really interesting take on the Abel, Cain, Adam, Eve, all this stuff. What does it actually mean? What's going on here? And this is from Martinez de Pasquale's Cosmology, based on his book, A Treatise on the Reintegration of Beings. If you read that, be forewarned, it reads even more difficult than the Bible in many ways. So pretty kind of like archaic sort of language that's harder for us to access. But here's a summary someone has made for you and I, which is a nice gift. This is on Scribd or Scribd, whatever people want to say. It's scribd.com. So we're going to see some of it here. So again, this is a very specific person's take on cosmology that is stemming from the Bible, but I would not say any of this is like Christian by any means. I would say it is, in as much as this person idealizes and idolizes Christ and aims to be Christ-like. But like the Christian churches would not necessarily say that any of this is real, right? So this is just one take on this, but I just find it interesting. It's an interesting look at Cain and Abel at the very least. So this is, again, a summary. I'm going to read point by point what this person is saying about this Martinez de Pasquale's cosmology as presented in his book, A Treatise on the Reintegration of Beings. So this is sort of a précis summary of that book. So before the beginning of time, God emanated spiritual beings. It's purely spiritual at this point. They were emanated from the fourfold divine essence. You can just say they were emanated from source. They were distinguished from each other by their virtue, power, and names. So there were separate beings. But they're all spiritual. They formed four categories that were much more powerful than the cherubim, seraphim, archangels, and angels, which God emanated afterwards. So these are even before the angels. They possessed part of the power of God, capable of reproducing forms. So they were creative beings, right? They were innate in the different organisms comprising the material universe. So any material universe aspects that exist in all of the universe contain a part of this spiritual essence, at least, is what that means. They were real and imperishable, having a personal existence, absolute and eternal within the divinity. By abusing the freedom that God had given them, some of these initial spiritual beings sinned. So this isn't the same as the angels and rebellions. This is something even before angels, and it's a creative aspect of God that chose to abuse their power and their creative energy, and that in itself was a sin. This basic sinful will of some of the first category of spiritual beings constituted the principle of spiritual evil. So this is where evil comes from. All evil in all of the universe comes from these beings who first sinned against God or misused their divine gifts or creative abilities. God created materiality to become a fixed location for them to act and exercise their malice and deprivation, to be a boundary of their evil operations, to become a prison in which they were emancipated. So all of material reality in this cosmology is a place where evil is able to express itself, to choose, to do anything it wants to do, as separate from and contained from the divinity, the spiritual beings that didn't sin or rebel, and everything else in creation that is non-material. So everything is non-material except this universe we're in. And this universe was created as a place for those beings to be in their rebellion. They're creative beings, right? They get free will, you would say, and they get to do what they want. And so this is the place. And some think of that as a prison. All of material reality. In order to appoint a sort of guardian to this prison, God emanated Adam, or the first temporal father. So the first father of time, the first material being that wasn't one of those evil or fallen beings. So when you say in the Bible who was east of Eden or who was in Nod or who are the other people in this cosmology, that's who they are. They are actually the fallen. They are the pieces of spiritual divinity that had chosen to rebel and sin and then got placed into material reality in order to carry that out to its logical end. That's why Adam was the first man in this cosmology. So it's very interesting, right? So all spiritual beings were subject to him. So he had power over everything. And it says that in the Bible, he had power over the animals and the seas and the this and the that. And Adam gets to help name them and all of this stuff. And Adam represented that category of spiritual beings who ranked in the celestial hierarchy immediately after God. So he's just like a pretty high level divine being, right? He had assumed a form that enabled him to act at will on the forms of living organisms and inanimate entities. So all of physical reality. As the emanated man God, his power extended over the entire universe. Without the rebellion of some of the first category, no spiritual being would have been made subject to materiality. No boundaries would have been established. Henceforth, the universe was composed of 4 realms: the divine immensity, the supraheavenly realm, the heavenly realm, and the earthly realm. And so again, you could still categorize this as like this purely spiritual, and then all of material reality, which is also this place where evil is sort of contained. Correspondingly, God emanated 4 categories of spiritual beings. The first 2 categories function in a medium where everything is spirit and nothing is matter, but they don't have the faculty of producing spiritual beings. So they're not creative beings. So you might put angels in this category, right? They're spiritual beings, but they're not creative beings. And the other 2 categories had the faculty of producing materiality, but used it only at the moment of their own emanation to form the physical world that was to serve as a molestation of the original rebels. So again, they're acting in physical reality to create and hold physical reality together, basically. The inferior beings created the celestial or heavenly bodies. So the planets and galaxies and all these stuff are actually consciousnesses in this cosmology, and they were created in order to make, create, and hold together all of material reality. The minor beings created the earth. Hence, there were 2 materialities. The celestial realm functioned as pure divine spiritual being, and Adam was assured of God's direct help in coping with the rebels when he went into material reality. These realms had been thus assigned exclusively for Adam's use, and since they were to serve as boundaries for the rebels, they depended on Adam so that he could exert his power on them according to his will and the laws of order. And his will is supposed to be divine will, and his imposition of order is also supposed to be like of divinity and in alignment with divinity. Such was the sublime condition of Adam. So the first human had these sort of attributes that were far beyond anything we would recognize today. Far beyond. Unfortunately, it says, like the rebels, he used his free will, and like them, he abused his privilege. His pride caused him to think that the power which God had assigned him over the universe was almost as great as God's. This sinful pride made itself known to the demonic powers, or those fallen beings we were talking about. One of their leaders persuaded him to operate his dominion over all inferior spiritual beings. Adam possessed the word, but he could not operate that power without God's active cooperation. However, Adam tried to create spiritual beings without God's cooperation. So he tried to reproduce, essentially, but he did it without God's cooperation. So I don't know if they say it specifically here, but in doing that, he essentially creates Cain. So this is why Cain is sort of bad from the beginning. Whoops. Why did I click that? And that's why, right? He misuses this creative power, and he ends up creating Cain. So, as punishment for this sin, God enclosed a soul in the material form created by Adam. That is Cain. God permitted this impure product to subsist from generation to generation, partly in order that we might learn that the miseries and hardships we have to endure until the end of time are not caused by God, but by our own primeval father, the creator of impure and passive matter, which is subject to suffering. So Adam's sin, right? And that's why they say the sins of the father and the first sin and whatever. And they also draw Eve into this and sure, but also this is like saying, yeah, the reason why you suffer and the reason you're in material form is because of this original sin. So in addition, Adam was banished from heaven, thrown into the earth, where the consequences of his sin were manifested in material form. The material form that he, in his sinful pride, had created now served to perpetuate a race of fallen souls. And that's Cain's lineage on earth. So that there actually are people who are inherently more likely to go the direction of the fallen route, the route of pain and suffering, the route that is separate from God. And there's a different line as well. So he found himself separated henceforth from God, exposed to the influence of demonic powers. He was unable to resist their seductions except by God's grace. The power conferred on him was so great that in spite of his sin, he was still superior to all other emanated and emancipated beings, and he did not lose direct contact with God, as did the rebels from the first category. He managed to preserve the original faculty and power he had received when he had been emanated. Because of Adam's repentance, he was reconciled spiritually with God and thereby reinstated into the same virtues and powers that he had held over the rebels. However, degraded and plunged into materiality, he no longer possessed all of the privileges that he had enjoyed in his primeval state of innocence. So he's saying, like, because Adam repented and tried to reconnect with God and wanted to be back into God's good graces, he retained that divine connection, but it is also not as powerful as it was before he fell. So we do still have access to God, divinity, grace, and upliftment, but it's just not as powerful. We can't just float away and turn into light balls and be free. We have to really work for it and spread it here on earth in this cosmology. So, however, since Adam had quitted his post, essentially, the good spiritual beings alone remained to ensure the supervision of the two lower realms and to prevent the rebels from leaving their place of exile here in material reality. At the same time, they had to function as intermediaries between God and man and were required to contribute to the reconciliation and purification of humanity. So there's the angels, it's ascended masters, like these are the spiritual guides and allies, right, in this cosmology. The story of Cain and Abel is an allegory of what happens if man does not cooperate with God. Adam's second sin, Adam committed a new sin when he and, well, whatever, we won't get into this part, but they procreated, this is Eve and Adam, they procreated Cain in sensual frenzy, but cooperated with God in forming Abel without any sensual excess. This is its whole own thing. You can get into it or not. We've talked about it before. It has to do with perhaps potentially semen retention and this sort of energetic retention where you're not sinning, but you can procreate, right? So it's just saying, like, if you have this sort of fallen, sensual, egotistical, arrogant, prideful energy, you're going the direction of Cain and the fallen and sin and the evil. But if you have this exalted, loving, like higher level, like thy will be done, alignment with that energy, then you're going the way of Abel, who was loved by God. So that, like, maybe Cain and Abel aren't even specifically actually these real beings, but they do represent what actually happened. Right? That's in this cosmology. So Cain asked the demonic powers to bestow on him a power that was greater than that given to God by Abel. And apparently they did so. I keep having to wait out these ads to get to the next piece, which is like super annoying. So I guess you have to be a member of Scribed to see this stuff. But overcome with hatred, he killed Abel. Who God had endowed with his own wisdom. Abel was, again, the uplifted sort of lineage and aspect of trying to reintegrate into God's alignment. And so that since Abel was murdered by Cain, that goodness went into Seth, as we sort of mentioned before. And God himself taught Seth through his messenger Eli, or Heli, sometimes he's called, the secret of those powers that contained and controlled the whole of nature, both spiritual and material. From Seth onwards, however, humanity's fate has been sealed forever. The plot and the personalities taking part in the drama that has been played out here on Earth has been determined for all of time. So you have free will, but also everything's predetermined, right? And a lot of cosmologies actually go that route. Now you have free will and you can sort of choose like what's happening, but like the preordained events are going to happen no matter what. And the souls that are reintegrating are going to reintegrate, and the souls that choose not to are going to not, or who knows what, right? That's all been preordained allegedly. Humanity, it says, was divided henceforth into two categories: the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth, or Abel. I mean, Abel didn't have descendants, right? But that lineage of the uplifted, the good. True and beautiful. Cain's descendants, it says, were outcasts, prisoners of materiality, skilled in gross material arts with a poor moral sense. So they may be better with working with the earth, or, Tubal Cain's craft was to craft metal, and create things out of it. And so they may be like skilled in these ways and able to work with the earth, but they have a poor moral sense. God kept them wandering about in spiritual darkness. When the flood destroyed them, the accursed race was reborn as the descendants of Ham. So they can't be killed off. They keep reincarnating. They keep coming back into this material form because this is where they're stuck. They can't ascend beyond this in this cosmology. So it is interesting too, because in that story about meeting Bigfoot and him saying that he was Cain and that he's wandering the earth, in that first sign that brought my attention to this mythology and this folklore, it said, right, he survived the flood. So it's interesting how it agrees with this cosmology that this line was meant to be cast out, but was instead reborn even after the flood. The flood was cleansing. Yeah, maybe it like reduced the impact of that lineage, but it didn't die. So Seth's descendants learned from their father how to worship in a manner that was agreeable to God, but they were as weak as Adam had been, and in spite of divine they were united with the children of men, and so they deprived themselves of all spiritual knowledge that Seth had imparted to them. So the children of men is the line of Cain. And these beings that were maybe perhaps closer to God also fell by mixing together with them. So there's a really interesting potential here to have this sort of ancient Atlantean story interweave perfectly here, right? Where Atlantis was this uplifted race of like higher level beings who destroyed themselves and wandered out and then mixed with all of the cultures of the earth. So we have this RH negative remnant, but also all of the rest of it. It's been like watered down and no longer a thing that is uplifted above other people, right? Mixed in with, perhaps part of the plan in reintegrating all souls. Who knows? So we won't go into the rest of it. But it does talk about how both in Judaism and in the Christian Bible, there's this story over and over again. Actually, all these characters are the same story over and over again of, having this offering of coming back in alignment with God and then wasting it somehow, or going back or sinning, or, going into pride or going into ego or falling again and mixing with other people again and over and over and over. But it does get back to man can be reintegrated into the same state in which God placed Adam after his second reconciliation. There to enjoy the same privileges accorded to Adam. This reintegration should become the supreme goal of humanity, and we must enter the path of salvation willingly. And this isn't the same as like accept Jesus into your heart. They have a very different view of Jesus in this cosmology, actually, but it is saying like you personally have to make this commitment and this, alignment with the higher level and the divine, and repent or purify yourself of whatever sins exist, which is another way of saying like your attachment to ego and your lower impulse and your base impulse of life, that you have to overcome that. So yeah, you still have this open to you. Your goal is to reintegrate with God and to leave material reality behind, and also the messenger, the repairer, or the reconciliator, the one that is here to bring you back to God is Christ. And so in this cosmology, it's also not just Jesus Christ. It is any being that comes from time to time cyclically to remind people that this path is still open and you can still get back. You still got time. Like, here it is. Follow me. And so that's many beings over the ages that have held that Christ-like energy. They also have a very unique view of Christ in this cosmology, in that Christ is actually the creator of all of material reality. So God's the creator of all spiritual reality, and Christ is the creator of material reality. And that's why he's the reconciliator. He's like there to say, like, all right, I'm here at the boundary. This is the space for you. If you want it, you can come back home anytime. So really interesting, very interesting, and interesting to see how it may kind of explain some things in the Cain and Abel, the Adam and Eve story, the creation story that you otherwise are like, hold up, like God created men, but there was already men here. God created the first man, but there was like already people living all over the earth. Like, what's happening here? It definitely has an answer for that, which the Bible doesn't. They never actually do. Gary Wayne does. And actually, Gary Wayne's cosmology might fit some of this. And it'd be interesting to know, right? We've got like 7 episodes historically that you can go back and listen to or watch on Rogue Ways or Rogue Soul now. It'd be interesting, to see how that might fit with Bigfoot and Cain and this cosmology from Pasquale, Martinez de Pasquale. So super interesting stuff here. But again, Bigfoot is looked at as a protector. If my experience was a Bigfoot experience, it was definitely not demonic. It actually saved me, right? And, I don't know if Bigfoot is a Cain-like descendant, a demonic sort of being, like the aspect that was fallen and placed into material form to wander the earth. Maybe this is Bigfoot's reconciliation. Maybe this is Bigfoot's path back to reintegration with the divine. Maybe this is Bigfoot's way, right? To say to the Christ-like energy, I'm ready, like take me home. Maybe that's why Bigfoot became the protector of women and children. Maybe he wasn't always. Maybe his goal was, the destruction of men's souls, or to call people away from God and deeper into material reality and deeper into ego and attachment and disconnection. Maybe that's why. Who knows? But Bigfoot definitely has a lot of protector stories. You definitely can't just say that it's like a universal, that Bigfoot's some sort of demon or, dark thing. Is not the thing. And just because I randomly came across it via Bruce Fenton, we were talking on Twitter. Bruce Fenton also has had many episodes on Rogue Ways that are fascinating. All his work is fascinating. Totally worth checking out. Would be also really interesting to see how it corresponded with this, cosmology that Pasquale promotes. But the Hopi prophecy is something he mentioned, and I thought it was really interesting. So there's a petroglyph known as Prophecy Rock, which symbolizes many Hopi prophecies. And here's its interpretation. The large human figure on the left, there's no picture of it on this page for some reason. I don't know why, but let's pull it up actually, so we can just look at it really quick. Hopi Prophecy Rock. Let's see if we can get a good image of it. Here we go. Let's open that image so we can see it stronger. And what? How did that just? Okay. So here's the rock. We've got like a person holding an arrow and a line. Then there's a box. And then there's this row of people standing on a line that kind of turns into a stairway. And underneath that is sort of maybe the ground and earth and some things growing. And another person who's like underneath all of that. There also maybe a sun right here, maybe a large feather over here. This is the rock we're talking about. So here's the Hopi's own interpretation of this rock. They say the large human figure on the left is the Great Spirit, or sort of like God, right? The bow in his left hand represents his instructions to the Hopi to lay down their weapons. The vertical line to the right of the Great Spirit is a time scale in thousands of years. The point at which the Great Spirit touches the line is the time of his return. The life path established by the Great Spirit divides into the lower, narrow path of continuous life and harmony with nature and the wide upper road of white man's scientific achievements. The bar between the paths above the cross and the coming white men, the cross is that of Christianity. The circle below the cross represents the continuous path of life. The 4 small human figures in the upper road represent on one level the past 3 worlds and the present one, and on another level the figures indicate that some of the Hopi will travel the white man's path, having been seduced by its glamour. The 2 circles on the lower path life are the great shaking of the earth, which they say is World Wars I and II. The swastika and the sun and the Celtic cross represent the two helpers of Pahana, the true white brother. Which reminds me of the white brotherhood, which is very much not racial at all. It's just that purity of spirit, that highest of the energies, right? The short line that returns to the straight path of life is the last chance for people to turn back to nature before the upper road disintegrates and dissipates. The small circle above the path of life after the last chance is the great purification, after which corn will grow in abundance again when the Great Spirit returns and the path of life continues forever. The Hopi shield in the lower right corner symbolizes Earth and the four corners area where the Hopi have been reserved, and the arms of the cross also represent the four directions which they migrated according to the instructions of the Great Spirit. The dots represent the four colors of Hopi corn and the four racial colors of humanity. So this also talks about a weirdly concurrent cosmology, right? Where there's sort of two paths of humanity, and some have fallen and some have not. Some have retained some sort of connection to what's called nature in this case, but is also the highest nature, right? The highest good, the God, or what they're calling, the Great Spirit, right? So retained connection to that. And then the people who have definitely not, right? And who have fallen. And in this case, it's the white man and his science, which is definitely, perhaps an appropriate way of representing like those who are crafty at working with the earth in the Tubal Cain way, right? Those who are crafty at like, we can create all this, we can do all this, we have all these machinations, but do we have our soul? Do we have connection to God? So these two paths are sort of in this Hopi prophecy as well. And there's a point at which you have a last chance to come back to God. And after that, it's like describing this eternal heavenly purity, which would be like the Christian sort of, millennial kingdom of God returning, or what in the cosmology of Pasquale might be the reunification with God. You no longer in the spirit, in the physical world. There's no longer a material reality. And I've talked about this before, where people are talking, I'm describing this, what I've been shown is what the sun's doing and our magnetosphere is doing, and this huge event that's coming, and this energetic waveform that's coming for us, and that it's uplifting to some and destructive to others, right? That those who are ready for it, have chosen it, are aligned with it, have like understood their soul, know that they're a spiritual being, intend to be in alignment with God, hope to be in alignment with God, hope to live a pure life. And those who have not even in the slightest, right, are not in anywhere near that, don't want it, maybe even actively working against it. And people have said, oh, but what if the world ends? And I've said, that's great then. Because if the world was created for you to find your way back to God, then you don't need it anymore if it doesn't exist anymore, or else it would still exist. Right? So it's really interesting to me how all of those things come back together, and all of these different cosmologies, all of these different views, and that really the goal is to hold yourself at the highest level, hold yourself at the heart or higher, right? Be in loving connection with the highest goodness, truth, and beauty as often as possible in every way possible, and care not about the cleverness of, or the machinations of, or the technology of, the other route, which again, none of those things in themselves are horrible. If they serve your highest self, if they serve your reintegration with the highest truth, then good. If they disconnect you further, draw you into ego, draw you into your lower nature, empower you to be in your disconnection, in your depravity, in your selfishness, then they don't serve you. And they're definitely not the route to go, right? Use the tools if you need to in the meantime, but maintain this connection at the highest rate, that it is, as Pasquale says, your one goal, actually. Out of everything else that might be going on, your one true goal is to reintegrate with the divine. And so that message exists in all of these, even in the Mormon, right? Even as like kind of maybe convoluted as it got, it also exists there. This idea that there is a fallen part of humanity and a not fallen part of humanity, a path to follow that is good, true, and beautiful, and a path that is not. And that like the most important thing is your soul. So however convoluted some of this gets, when we take it back to the syncretic thing that is repeated over and over again is by the Hopi and by the Mormons and by the Christians and by Pasquale is this, right? That you have a path back to the highest part of yourself, and that should be your deepest goal in all things you do. Your deepest goal in all things you do. So until it is, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones, a holly suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The pomp proceed as mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something big